I gave you my first rose, and I'm standing here giving you my last rose. Brian, will you accept this rose?
1000%. I love you, and I will accept that rose.
I love you too.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in again. This week, I have a very, very special guest. And not that all guests aren't special, because we all are special. We are all God's children, or whomever you believe. I don't want to assume. But this guest I have followed for such a long time. I have been a fan, and I appreciate who she is in our culture. And when I say our culture, I'm talking about the folks and the women specifically that look like me. She is a voice that speaks to all of us, very transparent, and I just love her. So she is an author of 2 books, Miss Me With That. And when I read that title, I read it like, girl, miss me with that. Hot takes, helpful tidbits, and a few hard truths, real love. She's the co-host of not 1, but 2 successful podcasts, Higher Learning and Morally Corrupt. She is a media personality, and again, such an important voice to our culture. Rachel Lindsay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. I'm so happy that I can be here and that we were able to make this happen.
Yes, and I'm going to need that mirror behind you. I really like that. I keep looking at that mirror like, I like that. I know right where that could go in my house. I really like that. But thank you so much. So I want to start out by asking, how are you? How have you been? I know that you went away to Europe for 2 weeks,
Yes.
and you said it was like a
Yes.
refreshing, like a reset. So do you still feel that way? Because I know sometimes we'll go on vacation, we'll feel it like, okay, I want to content create, or I'm just vibing. And then sometimes life gets in the way. How are you feeling now today?
Thank you for asking. Yes, that trip changed me in a way. Like, I just needed to get away, but I didn't realize how much I needed to release and renew. And I just came back when people talk about how they come back like a different person, I mean, I'm the same me, but just so much more zen, where I'm an emotional person. I can be sensitive, and I can let my emotions dictate decisions that I make or just how I move in everyday life. And coming back from that trip, I was just like, I'm not zen all the time, but I'm also like, when I feel it happening, I just take a beat and relax. And so I'm still in that space where I don't really allow myself to get really upset. I don't know, I'm just so much lighter, but also that was releasing things that were, happening in my life and shifting my mindset a bit. So yes, I am still in that place. I feel good. It doesn't mean that life hasn't tried me. It does not mean I haven't been tested, but I think about Europe. I need to, as I'm saying this, I'm like, I need to put some pictures up of Europe so I can remember, like, how was that girl feeling in that moment? I'm actually going to do that.
It would be really interesting for you to put pictures up. And I'm not trying to add more work to your plate, okay? I'm just a suggestion. But you describing that feeling, I happen to notice that you're on the cusp. I am an Aries 4/4, and I noticed that you're on the cusp. So when you say emotions dictating, that's me. And I feel like I'm learning to, especially with the podcast and different things I want to do, if my emotions aren't where they're supposed to be, I have a hard time seeing things through. And that's what I'm currently working on now, because I don't feel it. And those are the moments to me when maybe success comes when you least expect it. So if you were to put together a travel journey of some sort, like a reset type travel journey for us that like journals and, maybe want to partake on the, Rachel's reset,
Maybe I should. Maybe I should. Listen, I just say, go get lost in the south of Italy, because that was what did it for me.
So you talked about when you went getting in the water, it was something about getting in the water and then coming out. So did you feel like it just washed everything that you were going through, or maybe not even going through, but dealing with?
Yeah, I feel like I said this to somebody the other day. With water, it touches all of your senses. And I think that that's why it's so powerful. Like, I coming from a religious background, obviously there's a lot of symbolism in water.
Yeah.
Lauryn Hill, when she was still giving us music, has this beautiful song about water, just like the water,
Mhm.
that is amazing. And I even like, part of my vows had to do with water because of just
Okay.
like what it symbolizes. So, but that was the first time that I got in the water. And when I came out and when I was like thinking about it, I felt baptized. I got baptized at a
Yeah.
very young age. You know,
Me
like I said, I
too.
come from a religious background, but I really felt baptized in a different way without being tied to a certain religion, just more of a mindset, a shift,
Mhm.
a focus. Yeah, like it's so hard to explain. But no, I really feel like hearing water, seeing water, feeling water, just like immersing myself completely in it. That's why I say I feel like it touches every single one of your senses. And that's why it's so powerful. And I don't know many other things that do that.
And you saying that it touches all your senses sort of brings a clarity to me in terms of sometimes why people, i.e. me, are afraid of water, because it does touch every single sense and you have really no control over every single sense. And
Yeah.
it's funny, you're only the second person that I've heard talk about hearing water. So recently in September, my husband and I went away with some other couples on a trip, and I don't know how to
Good.
float. I am 46 years old and have never floated, like, ever,
Okay.
because once I start to sink, it's like, and I never wanted it in my ears. And the person who planned the trip, one of my close girlfriends, it was just me and her sister. And I like to look cute around the pool. Like, yeah, I got my earrings, my jewelry, but I'll get in, but never really immersed myself. And for some reason, again, going through things, thinking about life, different things. And I was feeling really emotional for some reason, couldn't explain it.
Mhm.
So it was just her and I. And out of 12 couples, it just happened to be her and I in this huge pool. And we just started talking. And I said, I don't know how to float. And she was like, okay, I'm going to teach you. And I was like, oh, girl, you know how you joke, girl, and you just move on. She was like, no, and I was like, oh, but I got my braids, and girl, they're going to be heavy when I get wet. She was
Mhm.
like, then they can just be heavy. And she wouldn't let it go. But she said to me, lay back. And she said, listen to the water, hear the water. And I was like, when she said that, and I just let go, when I tell you I was getting my float on for the rest of the time I got in that pool. But you saying that, hear the water, that's only the second time I've heard someone say that.
It's true. And I love what you said about it being scary, because there is something you have to trust the water to a certain point, because when you immerse yourself in it, it is all encompassing. You are, in a sense, drowning yourself with the water, and it is as it's washing things away. So yeah, that's a scary thing. That's a
Mhm.
scary to completely immerse yourself in any situation is
Yes.
scary. And yeah, and water is so powerful at the same time, so you don't want to be washed away, or you don't want to let it take control over you. And so yeah, there's just so many things with the water,
Yes.
which is you would think with all this talk about the water, I would be at the beach all the time in LA,
Yeah.
and I have not gone one time since I moved here.
And you've been there how long? Is it 2 years or
3
longer?
years.
3 years.
3 years, but the beach is different here. Like, what, I came from Miami. In
Okay.
Miami, I was always at the water.
Okay.
It's totally different.
Miami is such a different vibe. And I would always, when I've gone, you would think when I say when I would always go, you think I've gone a lot. I've gone 3 times, and I'm gonna tell you that I want to go back more and more. Those 3 times I went, every single time when I would touch down in Miami and leave the airport, and I would always be like, these are my people. Like, I just love, there's something about Miami that is very special. As far as, to me, and the music, and I just feel something when I go there. So again, you would
The
think
culture is rich there.
that's what it is. I mean, it was just such an amazing time. And I remember walking on the beach and just feeling the sand and feeling like, wow, now the last time I went was 2019, but even before, the second time before that was longer than that. But I just really, really love Miami. So do you miss it with you being in
No,
LA? Wow. Okay.
no,
That was quick.
I did not like Miami. I appreciate it. I loved the culture too. I tell people it's an in and out city for me. I don't want to be there longer for 3 or 4 days. I love that, my husband's from there. I loved getting to know the city through him. I love that his family's there, but it's really hard to live there
That's what,
if
yeah.
you're not from there or you don't spend, a lot of people spend half the year there or less. Then that's different. But it's just not as friendly as a city.
Got it. It's funny because it's like Vegas. My grandmom used to always say, everybody needs to go to Vegas at least once and don't stay no more than 3 or 4 days.
That's right.
You have your time, you get in it and you get out. So yeah, I can definitely understand. Does he miss it?
Yeah, he misses it.
Okay. Yeah. Now, how far, what are you like in LA, like right in the heart of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the valley, but
Okay.
like right over the hill. So I'm in LA.
So will we ever see you on Selling Sunset?
No.
I'm just kidding.
I mean, I don't do, first off, those houses that are on there, I am not on that level. I cannot afford that at all. But I'm friends with several of the ladies on Selling Sunset. So I'm a fan of the show. I love it. But I
Okay.
am not her. And at the moment, I'm not saying it'll never happen, but that right now, that is not in my budget, those type of houses.
We'll say, what is my girlfriend tells me to say, my budget doesn't allow for that. Currently.
Exactly.
I'm never say never, but just currently. So that's cool. Wow. Okay. That's really cool. So I want to talk to you. Y'all know Rachel is a Bravoholic. She's a super fan and we love that. But there's no way in the world I was going to have Miss Rachel Lindsay on the podcast without getting into some personal stuff before we jump into the Bravo of all things. I love the way you love Bravo because I don't think people understand sometimes, or they'll say, oh, these are just shows. And I'm like, no, like for some of us, it is. Yeah. And yes, of course you let it go in your everyday life. But these are like our mini Super Bowls throughout the week, especially we're in a good season now where we got Miami, Beverly Hills, Potomac. I mean, I'm kind of with Potomac, but Married to Medicine. So I'm like, we're in a Super Bowl right now. Salt Lake City is giving us some things. So, but first I want to get a little bit personal with you. So I was listening to your episode on the podcast, Two Black Girls and One Rose. Shout out to those hosts. They're funny. And I loved your episode. And you've been asked about Bachelor Nation from the time you were in it till even now. So when I bring it up, I'm bringing it up and, in reference to some things, because I'm like, I know Rachel's probably like, y'all listen.
I'm actually not, because it is a part of, it's how people first met me, majority of people, right? So I think there's a misconception that because I've had my issues and ups and downs with the franchise, and I was like, I'm taking a step away, I'm leaving the podcast, I'm leaving that world, but it still defines a part of me. And so I just don't like when people are on the show and they're like, don't talk to me about that. Don't mention it. No, like I am the first Black Bachelorette. So I actually don't mind when people ask me that, because it is a part of my story. And there's no part of my story that I don't want to address or, not include anymore.
I love that, because you're right. There are people that when you interview them or talk to them, they don't want to go back to that part of, because they've moved on. But I like how you said it defines some of who you are and how we met you. So and you made history, like, hello. So yeah. All right. So when you said that you decided in your mind to leave Bachelor Nation, you had already kind of formulated a plan. And one of your plan was, don't take any low-hanging fruit. So don't take the first offer that came to you out of leaving Bachelor Nation. So of course, in my mind, you having that plan, you're like, okay, I'm not going to take the first offer. I know my worth. I know my value. And you said you knew how you wanted to be seen, not just as a reality star, but as a media personality. In that time, was there any period where maybe certain offers weren't coming, or it wasn't quite turning out or appeared to turn out the way you thought it should? So you kind of maybe wished or doubted you not taking other offers that came along? Because sometimes we'll say, okay, we're not going to do this. I know my worth. But then an offer comes along and you say, well, it'll get my foot in the door, so maybe I'll take it. And then we end up compromising. So did you ever have any of those moments?
No, I mean, when I made a decision when I came off the show that I didn't want to do another reality TV show, I'd host
Okay.
it, but I didn't want to make my life the subject of another show. And there's something special about The Bachelor where, you know, me in that world, that house, those friends, that bachelor or those bachelors, as opposed to, you know, Housewives where you're seeing the everyday workings of my life.
Yeah.
I'm not that, can't be that public. I'm a little too private for that. So I was very adamant about that. So I don't regret opportunities, even if they weren't like, there was a discussion about maybe doing the challenge at one point, and
Okay.
I was just like, no, because they were thinking of me and Brian doing it together, and I don't watch the show anymore, but I knew that they would possibly pit us against each other. Somebody would try me, and you know, I just don't, I don't feel like showing that side of me. I think we all know I can go there. And I just was like, that's just not really what I want. And it's tempting because the money, there's a lot coming at you. The money is good
Okay.
and it can sustain you and allow you to invest in other areas of your life. But for me, it was like, but how am I investing in myself? I
Mm.
don't want this job or this ad to, or this event to define me. I knew that coming off the show that I really wanted to explore being a media personality. And as tempting as some of the other stuff was, I had to stay focused. And I think that that paid off to where I am now. I think if I was accepting all these things over here, I probably have a different type of podcast, or I wouldn't be looked at as the same way. I'm still looked at as the first Black Bachelorette, but more of a slasher, you know, like, oh, she's an attorney. Oh, she's, you know, she has this podcast. She has a book or things like that. So I wanted people to see, which was also almost the title of my book, more that I was more than a bachelorette. When I came off the show, I was saying to people, I want people to say, that's Rachel. Isn't she on this? Doesn't she do this? And
Mhm.
not just a bachelorette. So that was my vision and my focus. And yes, there were times where it was not hitting. And I've had I'm in a transition period right now.
Okay.
I had times where I was practicing law and then on the weekends flying to do radio or a free
Wow.
thing over here just to build up a reel and put myself in front of an audience or on somebody's show or a network to show that I could talk about things bigger than just reality TV. And and I was not getting paid for that. So I was using my savings for that kind of stuff. And so I questioned, should I leave law because it's defined me for such a long time? Or should I really pursue something that's of interest to me? And I did decide to do that. And once I said, okay, I'm going to let this go because this is holding me back, and I'm going to completely immerse myself in this, like water, things started
Ah,
to turn around for me. Things started to completely change. And now I feel like I'm back in that transition period because I was working at Extra for 3
mhm.
years, and I feel like that defined me for such a long time. And now, you know, there's the strike, we've had COVID, and after COVID, we were just starting to turn a corner, and then the strike hit.
Yes.
So I feel like this industry in this town is kind of upside down, and people are trying to figure out what's next. So that's difficult too, to stay the course when the
Yes.
jobs aren't as plentiful as they are, or you know, when a job that you've had for such a long time didn't work out the way you want to, you start to doubt yourself and have imposter syndrome and wonder, did I
Ooh,
make the right decision?
girl.
I feel like I try not to let those thoughts, you know, overtake my mindset, or, you know, like be the foregoing thought, but or you know, like the thought that's leading the way, but I definitely feel that at times.
You talked about you mentioned imposter syndrome, and that's something that I was dealing with recently. What do you do, or do you, when you start feeling that way? Because that can definitely hold you back. So I was saying to Rachel before we got on that for those of y'all that listen, y'all know that I started podcasting in 2016, had a whole nother type podcast, but really wanted to get into talking about reality TV and real life and watching it through the lens of a Black woman. And I wanted Rachel on my other podcast, but never reached out and just kind of like waited. But what I didn't tell Rachel was, so at BravoCon, I was with it was the end of the day on Friday, and it was in the area where you could buy food, where they had the nuggets and everything when you
Mm-hmm,
sit down.
mm-hmm.
So I was sitting with Kempire, and I look over and I was like, that's Rachel Lindsay over there. you were sitting at a table, and I think you may have been doing a podcast. And I was like,
Yeah.
she's got a microphone. And in my mind, I'm like, I want to be like, hey girl, but I'm like, nope, I don't want to bother. Plus, I know she's also here working, so I respect that. And then you got up, you walked by. The next day, I think I want to say, was it the Miami panel? Did you viewed the Miami panel? I think that's when I came up.
Oh yeah, I was in the audience.
Okay, so we were sitting down, like you were in a section, and there was an aisle, and we were sitting there, and Ken Pike was like, I'm going to step out for a minute. And I said, there's Rachel. And you have these moments. People think about you in a certain light. Like people always think, oh, she's not shy and she's outgoing and she's going to go for the opportunity. But you don't always feel that way, and you don't always feel confident, and you don't always feel like you have the right or belong in these spaces to be able to talk to these people. So before he left, I said to her, would it be weird if I go talk to her? And he goes, why would it be weird? And I was like, you're right. And so I walked up to Rachel. She recognized we both have beautiful gaps, for those of you watching.
Yes.
And she said, we're gap sisters or something. And I was like, this is it. So I told her how much I loved her work. And I have to say this, as busy as you are, as much as you have going on, I respect the fact that I said, can I ask you a business question? And you said, sure. I told you about the podcast, why I wanted you to come on. And you said, yes, go to blah, 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 blah. This is how you reach out. And when I did that, I got the response back. And it was like, oh yeah, Rachel flagged this and told me to look out for it. And I said, to me, I've ran across so many different people, from reality TV to people on shows and different things, that, oh yeah, girl, I want to interview, or even, oh yeah, girl, I want to help you do this, help you do that. And then you hear nothing. So for you to have kept your word and be a woman of your word, and literally, I was literally sitting on my couch and told my husband, oh my gosh, her assistant, hi, Rachel, said, blah, 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 and she flagged this. And he was like, oh, wow. So thank you for keeping your word for that.
Oh, thank you
I
so much for
appreciate
saying
that.
that. But I distinctly also remember talking to you, and I did say gap sisters, and I was just like, I think for me, I just know I'm talking about the hustle before, like leaving. Yes, I had a platform being Bachelorette, but just redefining myself so people didn't see me that way.
Mhm.
I remember getting a bunch of no's, and I still get a bunch of no's. I just got a couple of no's the other week. I remember the hustle, and I'm still in the hustle, but like grinding and, like the nerve it takes to walk up to someone and have that confidence. And you don't know if there's going to be rejection, or if you don't know if I was going to have an attitude or what, but you're putting yourself out there. And I keep that in mind. I try to remember that. And so if I can help, I really will help. And that's just in me. That's just who I was before any of this. And so, like I'm not always great at it, but I definitely remember our conversation.
I appreciate that. So then you said you're still getting no's, and of course I'm looking at you as Rachel Lindsay, right? So how do you deal with bouts of imposter syndrome? Like what gets you through those times? Because it could literally paralyze you. Like I almost not let me go to BravoCon, because a listener sponsored my trip because she said, I believe in you. And I feel like more.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Who's your audience?
Let me tell you, when I tell you, talk about manifestation coming from a background, right? So my dad was very big on what you speak. You need to be mindful of what you speak, because if you believe your good that you speak will come to pass, you got to know that the bad will too, right? So people were reaching out. Are you going to BravoCon? Are you going to BravoCon? And I'm like, child, if it is completely paid for, and I mean everything from tickets to hotel to, just talking. And in my mind, that could only come through one way. Somebody sponsors you, like a company, right? Sponsors you or does this. I had a listener who had planned on going, and something had happened and she wasn't able to go. So she reaches out to me and says, I've listened to your content. I love that I've learned from you. And she doesn't mind me saying she is a white woman. So she's like, I'm learning about white privilege and all this stuff on top of enjoying what you're talking about. I want you to have my 3-day VIP pass plus these add-ons, and I'm going to pay for your hotel and your airfare. So when I tell that story, I tell people, when you speak what you want, no matter who you believe in or who you speak it to, be open to how it comes. Because in my mind, yeah, I speak it. I believe it could happen, thinking it could only come from this way. And since it didn't, it must not be meant for me, but it came from a totally different direction. But I almost let it stop me because she believed in me so much and said, I feel like more Black content creators need to be in these rooms. My thought was, who am I to be? And that was my true thought. I mean, I was going through emotions. I'm telling my husband, I'm not going, I'm not this, I'm not going, and I eventually went on a jog. It was me, Jesus, and a YouTube in my ear at the same time running. And I felt almost like the water with you. I felt like that with the jog. And I told him I'm going, but I still had to fight through the imposter syndrome. So how do you fight through that?
It's a daily, I'm very want to be very honest. It is a daily struggle. And I like this question because a lot of people are like, you're so confident, you're so confident. I'm not all the time. And the main thing that I do to myself, I talk to myself all the time. I'm gonna get to the point where I start asking myself questions and start answering them. Like that's the level that I'm about to get to. I am my biggest cheerleader. I literally on my whiteboard right now, it says, get your shit together. Love Big Rach. That's what it says on my
Oh, I
whiteboard.
love that.
I'm constantly like, I allow myself to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling. I don't want to ignore that, but I just don't let it consume me. So yeah, like there are moments, especially being in this industry, and I say this industry, it's really any industry. When I was a lawyer, I look at other lawyers and I'm like, they're better than me, they're smarter than me, they're more talented than me, they work harder than me. We constantly live in a society where we have these constant reminders, I feel like, of you're not doing enough. And so I think that you have to be your biggest cheerleader because nobody's going to fight for you like you, not your agent, not your manager. I'm learning all of that as well. You have to be your biggest advocate. And so I am my biggest advocate every day. So I had an audition for a show like a month ago, and I did not get it. And when I tell you I was so unqualified for this role, I walked in the room and I was like, why am I here? This doesn't even make sense for me to be here. And it messed with my mind.
Wow.
I did the audition. I got sent home in the first round. I feel like that's never happened for me. It made me question how smart I am. It made me question, like what I've done to this point. I even got emotional about it. Like I needed a whole day to detox from that experience. But then I thought, Rachel, and this is how I talk to myself, you are allowing circumstances, events, and people to define who you are. I think the moment that you can release, I'm not going to allow this person or this thing to define me. I'm going to take the reins and do that myself. That's how I get over that imposter syndrome. Like I have to talk to myself, get your shit together. I know how bad I am. I know that I've worked hard to be here. I know I deserve to be here. And maybe the timing isn't right or this situation isn't for me, but that just means it's opening up the door or it's a building block or it's a lesson for the next experience. When I first came off the show, I've told the story before, I went to ESPN and I thought this is it. They know I'm a management major, sports law. I've worked with different organizations, teams, and they were literally like, no, girl, we're not giving you a job. We're just fans of the show. But that opened up the door for me to have one-offs with them, to meet people that I admire. I'm a big believer in networking and connecting in that way. And then a year later, I really was working for ESPN. And so that no, I didn't allow that no to define me. I didn't stay paralyzed in that place. My feelings were hurt. And I definitely went back to Texas with my tail between my two legs. Like I was so embarrassed. But then I thought about it and I'm like, you got the opportunity to go to Bristol, Connecticut, ESPN orders, a place that's like a Disney World for me. You saw people that you've admired for years. You made connections. That is something. So build on that. And
you got in the room. You were in the room.
I got in the room. I got in the room.
Okay. Listen, y'all, just so y'all know, this podcast, I'm glad y'all are listening, but it's not really for y'all. This is me and Rachel having a conversation. Just so y'all know, I'm getting a lot out of this. So I appreciate that. Because for me, it's one thing to be a woman in certain spaces and recognize how you're being treated. It's another thing to be a Black woman in certain spaces and your voice not be heard. There was a company, if you will, that in the height of Bravo, a movement, not a moment, who said, oh, we want your voice on this particular network that we have. We're going to figure out how to, for podcasts, we're going to figure out how to do it. I just need to talk to some people. And then it was a thing of, oh, well, we realized we didn't have the bandwidth, i.e. the movement was kind of, a movement, not a moment. It was more of a moment. And that to me was like a blow, because I'm like, wait a minute, you came over here. I was minding my business. So I had to kind of, like you said, talk to yourself, get yourself together. But I like that, big Rach. I like that. I really like that at the end. Get yourself together, big Rach. I need that type of energy when my alarm goes off at 5 and it says my alarm. You know how you can title what your alarm is? It says,
yes,
give God thanks and do some planks.
that's what I need. That is what I need. Now you take mine, I'll take yours.
And I'm like, oh, it rhymes too. And literally, I could show you, give God thanks and do some planks. Like,
yes.
Like, okay. So now I need to add, you have big Rach. My grandmother used to call me Lady T. Lady T makes me feel like, so I need to add Lady T, like get up and do some things. So I'm taking yours.
You gotta yell at yourself. You gotta talk to yourself.
Yes, like get yourself together. So now you have said, and some of these questions may be a little kind of like out of order, but there's a method to it, if you will. And I'm just saying that, y'all, in case y'all say, well, these questions are out of order. No, there's a method. Okay. But you have said that you and your co-host on your podcast, Higher Learning, when you are deciding to talk about topics, right? Because you are, you love Bravo, but you can talk politics, you can interview this. I mean, you talk to all the people and you are well-versed in all the things. One thing you said was when you are sitting down deciding, okay, what topics are we going to cover? You said that you ask yourself, do I have an interesting perspective on this topic? Which is, I've noticed lately with social media, I mean, even with Palestine and Israel and just different things that are happening, seems like everybody feels like they should have a voice. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't, but if you are your own barometer, how do you know? So you say, do I have an interesting perspective? How do you determine if it's interesting or not? Or do you also ask yourself, is my voice needed in this space? Because I know for me, sometimes I'm learning still about the Israel and Palestine. I talk to my friends who are Jewish. I talk to a lot of different people, but I feel like this is a time where I need to be learning and listening, because I don't know. But there are people who feel like their voices need to be in everything because they think they have the interesting perspective. So how do you determine that? Do you kind of take your audience? So the audience may think this is interesting. Like, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, it's recently had a talk kind of about like if we should restructure some things with the podcast. Like, even as we've been doing this for 3.5 years, I would say in the last year, we implemented the big deal of the day as a focus. And being 3 years into this, I feel like our audience has certain expectations.
Yes.
So some things we might not really want to cover, and we don't feel like we do have that voice. And that's where you'll see us, or that expertise. So that's where we'll bring in somebody who does. So we're, basically saying, hey guys, we're going to bring in a voice who can speak to this in a much better way than we can. We humble ourselves for that because we know our audience wants to hear from this, but we are not necessarily qualified or well-versed in this particular topic. So we want to bring in some help and have a bigger conversation. And maybe we can ask the questions that you guys are wondering as you're listening to this at home or work or wherever it may be. When it comes to like choosing what's interesting, we have a group chat. So we always are going back and forth with different topics. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to talk about that. And Van's like, well, this is why I think it's interesting. And sometimes I'll be like, well, I don't really care about it at all. Like, to be very honest, the Keith Leeds situation, I could care less about that. And people were so mad at my take. But part of my take was, I don't care. And that's kind of the energy that I was giving to it. But because for Van, having gone to Atlanta a lot and having a particular experience and kind of being in touch with a lot of people do care, Rachel, you don't. we knew that we had different takes on it. And that's something that's fun or interesting or will get the audience engaged. Like they're either very upset, like Rachel's out of touch, Rachel's this, or they're, with Van, like, oh, I agree with you or I don't agree with you. And we know that that's going to get a back and forth. It's going to have our Reddit go crazy.
Yes.
The comment on YouTube. So we think about that. And that's a method that is used on like The View, having been in those prep meetings for The View, having been in those prep meetings for First Take. It's here's the topic. Do we agree or disagree? And if it's a big topic that we all need to talk about, like the war, we have the same take on it, but we have to discuss it. So how can we discuss it in a nuanced way? We bring in voices. We talk about how it's affecting the Black community, how it's affecting our friends. We'll talk about it in that way.
I like that.
If it's a regular topic, like gender wars, we're always going to disagree on that. So we know that that's something that gets a lot of engagement too. So that's really like, I might be very passionate about something and Van's not, but we're like, well, that will still be interesting to talk about. So we really just go back and forth. But because we do a current events show, what's current in sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, all of that, it's sometimes the show writes itself.
Yes.
As far as topics, not our responsibility.
I like how you clear that up. Like, wait, the topics, not what we think.
Yes.
I like that. Okay, so which leads into a question that I have for you in terms of sharing yourself. So we know with podcasting, unless you are, even if you were recapping a scripted show, your feelings, you're talking about how you feel, and people are learning more about you and maybe like, oh, I'm disappointed that you have that take, or, oh, I don't like that you have that take. So it brings me to a question that's kind of similar, because you are a TV host, a media personality, you are a woman, you're a Black woman, you're a wife, you're a daughter, you're a sister. All of these things make up the totality of who Rachel Lindsay is, and you can't separate who you are. So in the XO Nicole article, you said, I quickly learned that we had to protect what we had and stop trying to prove it to other people when it came to your relationship, and to convince people to know what we know to be true. I wish I could share more of my relationship, but the moment you do that, you have to continue to provide more and you have to continue to answer. So that's your way of protecting your relationship. That's a part of you. There's another part of you that's very open on Morally Corrupt, on Higher Learning, when you are a correspondent for ET. How then do you protect that part when you are sharing with the world? How do you protect what the world is saying about you? And even with the whole Chris Harrison thing, when you on ET, because all of this is Rachel. So you're very staunchly protecting you and your husband's relationship, but then who protects Rachel when she's sharing?
I don't protect myself at all. I think that's a part of my image of just maybe what people do like about me. They know that if I'm saying it with my whole chest. I mean it, whether you agree with me or not. I'm being genuine. I'm being, forthcoming and honest. And so I think that I don't want to change that. I have been open about, and there's a difference, right? So maybe this is protecting myself. I'm open about how I feel, but I don't give details about the specifics of what's happening all the time in my personal life. And so there's a difference. I might say I'm feeling this, or, I guess that's more so speak from that, or I'll give my opinion about something else. And maybe that gives insight into how I am about other situations, but I really don't give the particulars that much. I will talk more on Higher Learning than anything else. Well, I give particulars about my relationship. I'll talk about like something we did on the weekend, or, a moment that happened, because Higher Learning feels, even though people get mad at me or they disagree with me, it just feels like a safe place, like a community that we created. So I'm more open in that way. But because it involves Brian, I try to be respectful about his privacy too. I probably would tell more about our relationship, but Brian is more private than me, and is more about those things. Like, I'm like, who cares? We don't know anyway. It's like, but Brian is more like, no, don't, which reminds me of my dad in a lot of ways. So I'm respectful that it's not just me in this relationship. But yeah, I'm not always the best at protecting myself.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go with it. This is how I
Because
feel, y'all.
it's how you feel. And I know, I'm sure you probably feel the same way. For me, I have to talk about things. Like, I'll never forget, I was going through something years ago at work, and a friend of mine, and it's funny, our birthdays were like days apart. So we were talking about the same situation, but each time we talked about it, it was more and more release. And her mom came in and said, "You guys are getting yourself worked up." I said, "It's actually the opposite with me. I have to start from the top and talk my way down, then I'll be fine. But if I
The
hold
Aries.
it, it's like, it's not going to be good."
I'm a talk about it person in the moment too. Like, let's just talk about it and let's just move on. So I get that. I get that.
And if I don't, if I'm telling you, the other caveat to that is, if I'm telling you, for someone who normally wants to talk about it, if I'm telling you I can't talk about this right now and I'm getting ready to cry, I can't talk about it right now, because I know once you say a word, once you say things, you can't take them back. It's good.
Yeah, I get it.
It's too late. Too late. And it's funny, my husband edits his podcast, so he'll be like, with certain things, like, "Are you sure you want to?" Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, because if not, it's like, I said it. And then sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, "Did you really want?" Yeah, I've said it. Right. So, and the audience knows who I am. So I definitely appreciate that. Now, getting into reality TV. In that same Exo Nicole article, you said, "I've always loved reality TV because it was such an escape from my real world. Part of me admired people who could put themselves out there in a way that I believed I never could until I went back on reality TV." So when you sit back and think about the time before you went on reality TV, you're watching Housewives, right? You're watching other Bravo shows, and we have franchises that are predominantly Black. We have franchises that are predominantly white. Then you enter into reality TV, first Black Bachelorette, and you start to notice different things. One thing that really stood out to me when you were talking to Ebony K. Williams on your podcast, Higher Learning, you said that with Ebony, if she had issues concerning, talking about race or different things, there were Black producers on the show that she could go to. You were having to explain to the white folks around you, like, "This is why I feel this way." You didn't have any support because you weren't allowed to have your cell phones. You couldn't talk to your family. You couldn't talk to your homegirls. So once you got into that world and reality TV, did it change how you watched Black franchises, specifically with the women, and be like, "Oh man, I wonder what they're going through behind the scenes," or, "Oh, I see why maybe they're reacting a certain way"? Like, did it change your perception from what it was previously?
No, only because I was on a love dating reality show.
Okay.
And so that's why I never watched The Bachelor before. I don't watch other dating love shows.
Okay.
I've seen one season of Love is Blind. I did enjoy it, but those shows, especially after coming off The Bachelor, that's hard for me to watch because I
Okay.
do like I look at it through a different lens. The
Okay.
lifestyle type reality shows, which I love, I started watching them because they were an escape, but they were also a comfort for me.
Okay.
And even now it's like, I just want to like get my glass of wine, or if I'm watching in the morning, my cup of coffee, and just like settle down and watch these shows. I love it. I love the characters. That's so like some franchises, like some of the drama is just so silly. For some other franchises, it's very real life situations happen. But it hasn't changed my perspective. I guess I'm very good at compartmentalizing things.
Okay.
That's a gift and a curse. But when I'm watching it, I'm just watching the show. And because I do the podcast now, sometimes I have to like turn that off and not compartmentalize it and look at it through a different lens.
Okay.
Because I'm to point something out. I might have to, like the colorism conversation in Potomac.
Mm-hmm.
I told it straight up. I was like, I did not like the way that y'all handled that conversation. I don't think I said that off camera. I think that was on camera and Watch What Happens Live.
Yes,
And
yes.
and I was very honest with it. And that was a moment where I couldn't just sit and watch and escape and just be like, oh, this is a conversation. It's like, no, because you were at BravoCon. Most people don't look like us who are watching these shows. That Potomac panel was packed. I was on stage. I could see the whole thing. This is, you can call reality TV silly, a joke, whatever, so prevalent in pop culture that people are watching this and think this is how Black women are. This is, and so if you're not properly addressing or having a conversations with the reunion should be about certain issues to an audience that isn't used to receiving them, that then it can be very dangerous. And not that reality TV should be a teaching moment, but should a moment come about on the show, then you have to address it, because otherwise it can be very dangerous.
I love how thank you for saying that. Should it be a teaching moment? No, it doesn't have to be. But if something comes up, because I have found on other shows with some of the women that don't look like us, people do take things as a teaching moment. But for some reason, as a person providing commentary for these shows and my thoughts, I'm like, it's received a little different when it comes from people that look like us. And when you talk about compartmentalizing, me watching these shows from the beginning, Atlanta is what brought me in. I've said this, those of y'all that listen to the podcast, I've said this 100 times, because for me, Atlanta, it was my aunties, my cousins, like the women, they're quick, they're fast, they had curves, they're eating on camera, like all of these different things. But I was able to compartmentalize. So when 2020 came, like I would have these conversations about stuff that I saw with my homegirls, right? But of course not. But then when 2020 happened, I'm watching people come to realizations and they're like, oh my God, how could you watch these shows when X, Y, and Z was going on? Because I already knew what I was watching going in. So I could compartmentalize and watch New York, knowing who and what I was watching. Yes. So you coming to certain realizations now, it's not as shocking for me. And someone who used to work in a corporate world, one of the few Black folks in my end of the building, that was everyday life, right, the different things. So it's funny. So speaking of, again, reality TV, I had mentioned Ebony earlier, and I said to you, as soon as I thought about talking to you, I was like, ding, ding, ding. Her and Ebony are so similar. They are both made history. And then I was taking, of course, your backgrounds into account, both attorneys, which all through elementary school and even in high school, I remember wanting to be either two things, an attorney or in broadcast journalism. So when I see women who look like me, who've occupied these spaces and both spaces, I'm like, girl, there is not a whole lot of us in those spaces. So, and I appreciate y'all. And I feel like we need to give y'all flowers again. So thank you. But when I think about the both of you, how you were marketed, very heavy on Ebony K. Williams, first Black housewife of, Rachel Lindsay, first Black Bachelorette. So in my mind, how I saw it was the lead-ins with this sometimes can make the audience feel a little bit better about watching these shows when they know what they're watching, right? Okay, see, they have somebody Black. We're not racist. These networks aren't, racist. You were marketed with that. But then when you got in, they didn't want your voice to be that. That is how I felt. So is that something that you felt in Bachelor Nation and coming out of it? Like y'all put this on me. First Black Bachelorette, very heavily marketed it, but then y'all don't necessarily want my voice with that.
Yeah, I wonder if it was different for Ebony, but I always say the Bachelorette in general, they want you to be seen and not heard.
Okay.
So they don't want you to have like too much of an opinion, because they more so want it to be like, like she does this, look at her, she's so dainty. And in a way, you're the lead and you're in control, but you're also so helpless. And these men have come to save you and provide you. Society has told you you need a partner. Like there is that whole element of it as well. So in general, I felt like bachelorettes were not supposed to be too outspoken, because that's not as ladylike as you're supposed to be. I feel, and I do think this is definitely the case about Ebony. You saw a lot of similarities between me and Ebony, and there are. And when you're the first, I think that it has to be, you have to be easily digested. The audience has to easily digest you. So you have to be, it has to make sense. Oh, they're Black, they look a certain way, they come from this family or whatever, or they have a story, they're lawyers, they've done this, and they check all these boxes. Where when you look at the other people who've either come before you or you're a castmate with in Ebony's situation, they don't have to have those same, that same standard definitely not applied to them. So I definitely think that it was like, okay, they fit. People can say, oh, we understand why they're the first. Oh, okay. Like if it's like work twice as hard for half as much type of thing. Standard that is different for us. We have to be great and excellent to even be seen or have an opportunity. But in regards to the voice, I do also think they thought, well, then she'll know, this is for me, she'll know how to act, right? She's going to be able to act right a certain way because, her dad is a judge and she's this attorney. And so she's been in these spaces before and she will act accordingly. Not the stereotype you might see on another reality show or in a music video or whatever else it may be. And you didn't see it on The Bachelor because they never made it far enough for them to even have a personality. They were just a filler. So I think they thought they were going to get somebody else. And they underestimated the fact that my sole purpose for saying yes was for representation purposes, not as my look. It was to also have a voice and speak out and hopefully pave a way for other people of color to tell their love stories or have these same opportunities. And so I did play the game. I was myself, but I also I didn't ruffle any feathers because I thought I am paving a way. So in 2017, when I did that, I expected to see some change and to see more people of color. They didn't have to be Black, but just representation throughout the franchise. And there wasn't. It was as if they were like, see, we gave you somebody who's not white. And now we can go about our business. And it wasn't until 2020 that they did Matt James. And I was outspoken about that. It's like, oh, this is your response to what's happening in the world, not because you really wanted to choose him. It's the equivalent of putting up a black box on social media. And that's when I started to get upset because I was like, there is no change. And I was always pushing, they're like, oh, who do you want to be Bachelorette? And I'd be like, I'm rooting for, CN, like somebody who's Black.
Yes.
That Issa Rae, I'm rooting for everybody, like that kind of
yes.
So, but then I was way more, and then I had the podcast at that time in 2020, and I was like, okay, I'm really going to use my platform to speak out because I thought that there was going to be change and there wasn't. And I knew that there was a cushion and a safe place for me to be able to do that where other contestants of color couldn't because I was the first Black Bachelorette. So they had to walk on eggshells around me because of me being the first. So I knew that I could move in certain ways that other people couldn't. But I definitely think that they thought I was going to be somebody totally different.
and smile, just smiling. Yes. Okay. And I like,
it's grateful to be there.
I'm just happy to be allowed to occupy the space. Let me tell you something. The episode that you did, where you talked about your former co-host and I believe her ex-fiance and some of the things that he was doing on social media. I sent that episode to so many people. And I remember telling myself, because sometimes you start to question yourself in terms of, well, maybe should I just stick to, I know I went in this with the intent to speak from the perspective of a Black woman, and I'm still going to do that. But are you coming across harsh, or are you, just different things you ask yourself. And first of all, I listened to that episode about 3-4 times, that I remember sitting in, because I always like to associate, I was sitting in the Walgreens parking lot and I was picking up something. And I remember just sending that episode to people like, listen to this. Because for me, you're on a podcast on a network. It's supposed to, this is about the Bachelorette and, just sort of that whole, it's sunny and bright and we're talking about this.
Exactly.
And I loved every single minute of that podcast episode. And it was a reminder to me to all when you speak your authentic truth and who you are, and that doesn't always mean in a certain type of way, but as long as you stay true to who you are and what you set out to do, opportunity and doors will open and people will hear you, even if it's just one person that needed to hear that message. So I appreciated you. I'm telling you, that episode was like, you better speak, Rachel.
Thank you. That was our most listened to this day, that episode of Bachelor Happy Hour. And the whole premise of it was to have a conversation, two different women who are different in pretty much every way, but have a shared experience, to sit down and have this conversation, because so many people didn't know how to talk to each other. And then we had the whole, Garrett situation of it. And it didn't help that I was on Danny Pellegrino's podcast. And I was like, I go, well, he's a piece of shit. Oh my God.
I remember that episode too.
I'll never forget. Brian goes, were you drinking? And I said, no, it was 2 PM when I recorded this podcast. Something took over me. I was not myself. And it was the only thing that came to mind was to say that. And this is what I mean about not protecting myself. And immediately after I said it, I go, oh God, that's going to make the news. And Danny it was not in Bachelor World. So he was like, no, it won't. And then he texted me. He's like, oh my God. And I was like, yeah. But that led into having this conversation, two people being very vulnerable and dealing with real life situations. So it's a Bachelor podcast, but that's our shared experience, but we're also friends. And so you see two people struggling to have this conversation, and it was very raw and real. And it went in a much better direction than I even thought that it was going to go starting off. So yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm very proud of that episode.
You could hear, I felt like I could hear both of your heartbeats, both of you going into it like, I love this person, but I have to speak how I feel. And I appreciated her for receiving, because the receiver on the end, I think sometimes, especially when it came to Black Lives Matter, I think people that didn't look like us took it as I'm calling you a thing. And it's like, I'm not calling you a thing. I'm speaking to my experience as a Black woman who's married to a Black man who has Black children, or what have you, or just simply from being a Black woman. I'm not calling you a thing, which is why I like to know people's history, because if you know their history and what they've been through, certain behaviors, you can be like, oh, I get it. And you handle them differently. So I loved it. It was something about that episode. Like you said, it was raw, it was real. And I was like, if we could really have conversations like that in our friend groups, let's put everything on the table. And y'all did that on air. And you could tell it wasn't scripted. It was speaking from your heart. And I remember there being points where she just was like, I mean, you're right. Like, what can I say?
She received it. She received it. And that was what was like, she didn't have pride, ego coming in. She listened, and her heart was open too. And now she's with a man of color. Now she really opened up.
She really did. Rachel going around having conversations, and next thing you know, family trees look a little different. Oh my gosh. So we're going to get into a little Potomac. Let's talk about your overall thoughts on this season, the divided cast. Do you think the show can move forward with this divided cast, the subject matter? I need all of it.
So yes, I love Potomac. I'm a big fan. And I have not seen the most recent episode. And funny enough, Van is all in. So Van was like telling me. So we talked a little bit about it on a podcast. So I know I have a general sense, but I haven't seen the specifics of it. Because again, remember, I like to sit. I like to take my time as I'm watching it. I don't want to watch it on the go. I want to take it all in. So I going into this season, especially having done the panel at BravoCon, and I said this before, that I'm worried for the first time ever about Potomac. There's such a divide. There's true dislike to where they can't even fake it.
Yes.
That wait, because also let me just backtrack. What's been great about Potomac is it has pretty much been the same cast. And you can tell that they like even the Giselle and Karen, like they go at each other, but then they don't. And it's just like it's a game they play and it's fine at the end of the day. But real accusations have occurred. There are lawsuits involved. This is very messy, and they all cannot stay. This isn't a, oh, we don't want you to be here because you haven't been honest about everything going on in your life. It's not, that's not what we're dealing with. And so, and even like the addition of NECA and the storyline that she's bringing adds to the problems. It adds to the chaos. It adds to the divide. It plays into emotions and feelings that other castmates already have about Wendy. And so it's just creating this wedge. And so I'm not, these first few episodes, I'm not liking the way that things are going because it's adding to the fear of the cast as we know it with Potomac. Like Potomac won't go away, but the cast as we know it is done. And I don't know how you choose this person. Don't think any of these women will allow themselves to be put on pause and then return. I don't think that either any of them would be a friend of. It's going to be all or nothing. It's almost like, and I'm not saying this is who NECA is, but it would be the equivalent of bringing the energy that she has so brought in so far is the equivalent of bringing Monique back. If Monique comes, there's a clear divide about how that situation was handled.
Yes.
And it would, she would be on one side and the other side wouldn't mess with her at all. And the way, and that's what NECA's doing. And I don't think it's for her. She's got a lot to bring.
Yes.
She's a true housewife, but you immediately come in speaking to the person who does not like Wendy about these accusations and playing into certain stereotypes. And once again, having conversations that this audience has never seen before and is not ready for. So like, I'm curious as to how this will be addressed at the reunion. But then can I also just say, I'm disappointed in the women for allowing this to happen.
Rachel, when I tell you, we grew up in a Black family where there's kitchen table conversation. And going back to season 5 real quick, I wasn't necessarily Monique's biggest fan, but what I will say was when all those women sat around her and basically made her the downfall of Black women, I was like, absolutely not. If you felt that way, this should have been an off-camera conversation because the audience that doesn't look like us are not familiar with certain conversations, certain colloquialism, certain things that we've had to deal with. So now here we are, season 8. And for me, when NECA sat down with Ashley and Ashley brought up that, 2 years old article, because I remember when that article came out about Wendy, I wish she would have said, wow, oh girl, that's a lot to put on somebody. In our culture, we don't perceive it as blah, 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 blah. And I want your opinion because when Ashley said, she's a doctor, and NECA said, she didn't say a doctor of, oh my God, the word is leaving me. What Wendy is a doctor of. And NECA questioned that. And some people were like, oh, I just thought she genuinely didn't know. What we're seeing NECA say is, I know Wendy. I know Wendy. I don't know Wendy. I know Wendy. So you've said you knew Wendy about how many times? Then you knew that she was not a medical doctor. Your husband is a medical doctor. Yeah. So to me, I felt like that was shade. Like, here we go.
NECA's a fan. There's no, it's why I could never be a part of a housewife show. Like, I can't pretend like I don't know y'all. I've been watching y'all for 8 seasons. Now, I don't know if she hasn't been before, but seeing especially the connection between Wendy's sister and her cousin.
Come on now.
She's very familiar with Wendy. And I don't know this for sure, but I would bet she's a fan. She at least watched last season. She's not coming here completely like, at this point, it is hard to step into any franchise and say, I never watched or I didn't know. Then why are you want to be a housewife?
Exactly. I appreciate it. I know I'm bringing her up again, but I appreciate it. Ebony, she said it on your podcast and other ones before. Yes, she watched the shows before, but she had to make a conscious effort to give everyone a clean slate in her mind because now she's a part of the cast. So when she's getting messages like, you need to go for Ramona's neck or you need to do X, Y, and Z, she's like, I cannot do that because this is new for me and I need to give everyone a clean slate. And I feel like Nneka did not come in with that energy. I really didn't like that conversation because it was definitely shade when she questioned whether Wendy was a medical doctor. Again, if y'all know each other the way you say y'all family know each other, you knew Wendy wasn't a medical doctor. And then to me, when you see this latest episode, I'm going to have to know your thoughts because it was so, there was a lot of Wendy doing a lot. And I love Dr. Wendy. Lord, what's that? Lord knows I do. But I feel like sometimes she feels like maybe she has to kind of put on for the city a little bit. And for me, just be one. And who knows though, she's getting more comfortable in front of the camera. So maybe the Wendy that we're seeing that is a little extraness, maybe that is her, right? I don't want to say it's not her, but if you're listening, Dr. Wendy, I just want you to know we just love you for who you are. I loved hearing you talk about your 4 degrees. We didn't care when people were talking about 4 homes or when people were talking about my husband has this on Miami. So I love the fact that I'm watching a Nigerian woman talk about having 4 degrees, her and Candace with their masters. But I don't see a way that they can move forward unless they're doing 2 different shows, sort of like what they're doing in Jersey. I don't see that for Potomac.
But they keep giving us back the same arguments with the same family. This is what I'll say about Wendy. I'm indifferent on Wendy. I do think that she is unfairly treated and not given a chance by the Green-Eyed Bandits. They don't like her. They've made up their mind. And I feel like they don't have a legitimate reason to dislike her, at least from what we've seen on camera. I will acknowledge that maybe there's some things that were left out.
Yes.
And maybe this is what they're feeling that I feel from Wendy. When Wendy first came on the show, that first season, just had the baby, there was a total difference in her look from her first season to her second season. I liked that Wendy. I liked that she talks about her degrees. I loved seeing her with Eddie and her children. I loved that she was a Nigerian woman and we were seeing that for the first time. I think that, I don't want to say the first time, but we don't see that much of it because I'm not quite sure. Don't fact check that, but we had not, at least we didn't see it in the Potomac.
Right.
And so I appreciated everything that Wendy represented and I was excited for her. When Wendy came back, I'm not even against the fact that she had the, decided she wanted the mommy makeover.
Yeah,
good for you. That's a conscious decision that you make. You look great. I thought you were great before. You look great now. It's the attitude that came with it. Now, I am unfamiliar with the mommy makeover attitude. And I'm not saying that she has an attitude. It was the way she talked, the way she acted. It was like she was trying too hard, in my opinion, and trying to be what she thought. It's like she watched herself the first season and thought, oh no, I need to be like this to be a housewife. And there's this air that she gives off that comes across as condescending and a little rude and a little annoying. It's like, just chill out. And it's just, I don't know, it's just trying too hard for me. It's off-putting. It's off-putting. To be very honest, I felt that way on the panel too.
Girl, wait a minute. Y'all.
Be honest, if you asked me and you haven't, so I'm just going to say it.
The
least friendly person was Wendy.
So let me tell you, first of all, Rachel, for those of y'all that don't know, Rachel was the moderator of the Real Housewives of Potomac panel, which if you didn't know, you probably were living under a rock or not watching all of our BravoCon recaps. Let me tell you, you did an amazing job. And also I loved your Ask Andy because I love how you it wasn't just your standard questions. You a little bit not pushed in it. Yeah, you kind of pushed a little bit, which I love that Potomac panel. My butt cheeks were so tight through the whole thing. Girl. So I will say this. That is not the first time that I have heard that, which is very disappointing. about Dr. Wendy, and I will say this. I love how you, in the beginning of I think you said it on the podcast. I don't think you said it off, but if not, if by chance we weren't recording, I'm going to say it. I love how you talked about making sure that Black media was represented for you, meaning speaking to Black media. And I'll say that's not always the case with Black housewives that may or may not have been on the Potomac panel. And there you go. So you saying that is very disappointing, but not shocking. And I sometimes wonder if people in those spaces come across other women that look like them in the same space, even though you may not be a housewife, but you are moderating a panel, which means your voice is trusted and you come with some accomplishments behind your name. And I wonder if sometimes it's easier for people to thrive in a space, people that don't look like them, but then when they get around people that do look like them, here comes that crab in the barrel type mentality.
Maybe. I hope maybe she was having an off day, and some people do, but then you're saying that you've,
I've definitely heard that
before. Everyone, I mean, even the ones that I wasn't as big of a fan of, I sure did become a fan after, just because of their presence. Mia, lovely. Charisse, lovely.
Wow.
It was backstage. There was a warmth there. And
that you felt because you could feel. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I already know Giselle and Ashley and Candace. Nneka I met before. I mean, not before, I met her then. Karen I already knew. So them I'm not speaking to. Robin was great as well. That was my first time actually meeting Robin. But you know who was super friendly? Eddie. Happy Eddie.
Yes.
So nice.
Listen, he was happy. Let me tell you, I saw him in the Bravo, in the VIP lounge, right? And because of the things that were put out about him, all these women were swarming him. So I was like, you know what? Everybody also wants to take a picture with Wendy. I'm gonna get a picture with Eddie. So what I did was I tapped, and I'll give Eddie credit. Eddie had them hands in front of him. Like, I think about a different panel, like Jersey, where they're all like, all hugging up.
Yes.
I tapped him and said, my husband would love that blazer. Can I get a picture? Like, I'm just here for the picture, but he was definitely, and his smile lit up. You know who else? The people that ran their booth, we cousins now. Every time we say, cousin, like, they were so friendly too. And I feel like that's an atmosphere that has to be created because everybody's booth representatives weren't that, but they were very friendly. Now, of course, they could have also wanted to sell us some candles and stuff, but they were very friendly. But it's just so disappointing when you hear that, because I wanted to ask you what you felt from everyone and the tension. I'll say this too, after everything y'all just heard me say, and I'm speculating on what it could or maybe could not be. With Dr. Wendy, I have said before, that I really liked her. And to me, Issa Rae, I'm trying to really root for everybody Black. So when you watch these Black franchises, you're like, I don't want none of y'all to not win. But I will say, I think with Wendy, the audience, i.e. the viewers, play into it. And I feel like she's read comments, read things, and has also, like you said, maybe she's being the housewife she thinks the audience wants to see. Because the question, an audience member asked the question, what's the relationship with you and Giselle? But the audience member first said, we love you, Dr. Wendy. And the crowd went wild, and she, lit up, which of course.
Ate it up.
I mean, it was like a whole new world. Like, she just opened up.
And to be fair, so does Candace. Every single time, Candace is the same thing.
She puts on, you know what? Can I say that I appreciated about the Potomac panel, though? Because versus the Atlanta panel, Atlanta will always be like number one in my heartbeat. But the energy from that panel, watching the panel made me go, I can understand a reboot, because I was against it before. Anybody who talked about it.
Was it really empty? Because I didn't make it to. I heard it was very empty. Is that true?
A lot of people didn't make it then. It was very empty. I was almost embarrassed. Like, this is Atlanta. It was so empty. And I'm talking about not even just like the middle seats, the back. I'm talking about the front seats. It was very empty. But Potomac, when I watched, I had to respect the energy that everybody gave. I
Mhm.
felt like they were there for the fans. And two in particular, I said with Karen and Candace, they know how to put on a show.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah,
they
they
definitely
do.
did.
They
If,
do.
I'm going to put you on the spot real quick. If Bravo came to you and said, Rachel, we trust your voice and we want you to have a hand in possibly restructuring the cast, what two are mainstays and what two could you see the franchise without?
This is for Potomac.
Yeah.
This is so tough for me because I'm friendly with them. But if I'm truly going to pick, and I think people can agree with this. Oh, this is tough.
Don't make me close this camera on you, Rachel. No, I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
Two mainstays.
Yes, who are the two mainstays?
Karen, hands down.
Yes.
Karen has to stay. What I'm going back and forth with is either Giselle or Candace.
That's, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's like, I can't decide
Between these two.
Like, to me, there's something that like Giselle and Karen kind of run it all. And that's why I'm leaning towards that.
Okay.
I feel like they were the OGs when they were putting this together. The kids are in Jack and Jill. They're just
Yes.
it makes sense. But Candace also brings so much to the show that I can't pick. It's definitely Karen, and it's either Giselle or Candace.
Okay, I can accept. Okay, I like that. And then you got to answer the other part.
Wait, what was the other part?
Oh, what two could you see not returning if you had to?
Okay, I'm not going to include NECA because NECA's not NECA. It would definitely be NECA and Mia.
Got it.
That I would
Okay.
put Teresa's friend of, but if we don't count NECA because she's new, then I would say Robin and Mia.
I agree with that too. I feel like with Mia sometimes, and I know this isn't maybe not necessarily fair. People talk about delusional housewives, and to me, it's a difference between delusional housewives and housewives, as Giselle said that. Giselle has said, we all know Mia be lying, but we love her. I don't want to watch and have to decipher if you're telling the truth. Now, if you want to be delusional about a 50,000 square foot home that you're living in, and there's delusion and lying is different. And with Mia, I can't be using that many brain cells to be like, I can't get invested in your story because I don't know if it's true.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. But at the same time, I can see her in real life having a warmth to her also. So that's interesting. Okay. And then the last thing, are you loving Married to Medicine? I feel like it's the best franchise.
I'm caught up. I'm fully caught up now. So yes, I love Married to Medicine. I think it's so rich. Whoever found Sweet Tea, and whoever said, we still talk to Greg and y'all got to meet Sweet Tea, needs a raise. They need like the addition. Even when I would watch the trailer for the season 10, which is incredible that they've 10 seasons, I didn't know who that was. So I was like, whoa, well, who is this new doctor? Who is this doctor, like wife of a doctor? And when we met Sweet Tea, I said, it's not ready.
Listen, I met her at Bravo.
She was at BravoCon?
Yes.
See, I wouldn't have known who she was.
Well, I didn't either at first so I got to go behind, I'm gonna say behind the gates, but where you probably were, those black curtains, like where they were all hanging out, and she was in there. And she spoke to somebody, and then she came up and I said, oh, hi, how are you? Blah, blah. And she goes, I'm just so nervous about what people are going to think about this season. And so I said to her, I said, as long as you're yourself. Oh yeah, I was myself. And I said, as long as you were yourself, people are going to love you. And she goes, I said, or not. And she was like, oh. I said, so you got to be prepared for both. But as long as you want them to either love you or not love you because you were being yourself. I said, because the audience will be able to spot you being inauthentic. And then, and I actually, my first words to her when she said, hey, and I think we gave each other a hug, and I'm like, why are we like, it was just a thing to do. Right. And I said, are you and Toya really cousins? Because she said, no, people just said that. So we just ran with it. So I'm not going to lie. My first mind, I thought, so you be lying.
I didn't even know that was out there. She's very lucky that Married to Medicine had not premiered prior to BravoCon. She is. She is, because we didn't know anything about her.
Nothing
But
about her.
I am thoroughly enjoying the season. I think I got excited when I saw Quad from a distance. I did not get to say hello. I got excited when I passed by Dr. Heavenly. She complimented my suit, and I go, "Oh, I love you, Dr. Heavenly." And I don't normally act like that, but I was very excited to see some of the ladies from Married to Medicine. I am a fan. I wish that I mean, for 10 seasons, obviously a lot of people are watching it, but I didn't go to the panel, so I just don't know. I just feel like they still don't get the same love, but it's also, I just feel like, because they're not a housewife show, and there really is a division. You're either housewives or you're not. And that's just the way Bravo is.
And that's it.
But
With
Married
this
to Medicine is top tier.
top tier. And I will say, and I've said it before, when it comes to, you try to figure out if these people are authentic, or in who we see, is that who we get. Years ago on my other podcast, my husband and I interviewed Dr. Eugene and Toya, and I will say who we got was the same people that we watched on the show, was the same people that we've seen. So I
because I'm not a Toya. I was like, please don't tell me Toya is totally different. I need Toya to be the same. I need her to be the same.
The look on your face, if I could, I'm going to screenshot it and send it to you. Those y'all that are watching, you will see Rachel's face. I felt it. I felt the energy, like, this is. Are you not a fan? Because the audience to me seems a little bit, I won't even say divided. Like, some people are indifferent to her. Some people don't mention her. Some people are very much like, and some people are very much like, yay. What is it about Toya that because I have certain Bravo Labs that I watch that it's a no for me.
Okay, I'll say this and then I have to
go. Yeah.
Toya it's a hard pass on Toya. And every season I go in with a clean slate.
Okay.
Like, I'm really like, I mean, obviously the women like Toya for the most part, but I just find her loud and wrong. I think that she is trying to fit into what, she's constantly trying to prove herself. And last season, we did see her get vulnerable and talk about how that fight with Mariah, that first season, really affected her. And she wants to get rid of that image. And to be honest, that's so long ago, I don't even think about that. Like, believe me, you've given us other things to talk about, Toya, when it comes to you. And she's just not delusional, but the constant, like, the materialism and trying to, like, have, it just doesn't make sense. Why are y'all moving so much? This is a real topic of conversation. You're moving all the trying to prove your wealth and your worth, and maybe you do feel insecure from where you've come from to where you are now, but it's just so obvious. And she's just obnoxious to me. She's not funny. Like, if you're Dr. Heavenly is obnoxious, but she's
funny. You can't deny that.
I can look past it because you're making me laugh during it. Toya doesn't have that charm. And she just, again, I've never been a huge fan of tryhards. There's just nothing effortless about Toya. She's always just like forcing things on you, like her wealth. Like, remember when we saw that one house, is my dream house, this is my two-story closet.
Yeah, and then
you don't have to do all of this.
Yeah.
And I think I would like her so much better. I love Toya with her children.
Yes.
I love the vulnerable moments of her talking about feeling lonely in her marriage because of how Eugene had to be with COVID and with work. I appreciated the vulnerability. I felt like, okay, this is the Toya we need to see. But when she's putting on, I don't like it.
Yeah, it's putting on for
this. That more than she doesn't.
Thank you for being honest, Rachel. See, I knew I was going to love talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to talk with me. I appreciate you so much. And I look forward to everything that I know you're going to do in the future. So thank you. And
same for you. And I just really appreciate this full circle moment. I'm so glad that it happened. I'm glad I didn't get to talk to you before. I'm glad I got to talk to you now. There's so much more to talk about. I'm so glad you came to BravoCon. I'm so glad that like it was a beautiful experience, that we met and that we're able to have this conversation now. And I'm sure it won't be the last one. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Rachel. And I have to say on air, I have that same chair, but in orange. I was looking at your chair like,
don't you, I love this chair.
It makes me feel like
exactly.
I have this one and it's up against another wall. When I sit there, I feel like I'm doing business or I'm doing something. So, yes. So y'all, I know y'all loved Rachel as much as I do. Make sure you go check out all the things, all the projects. I know y'all are just as excited of what else is going to come from Rachel. And I'm just going to say, hi, Brian. For you guys. So no, seriously, and all y'all, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for downloading. As always, y'all know we can have positive discourse. I'm open to it, but if you're disrespectful, you know what's gonna come from that. But we can get down in those comments. I will talk to y'all later. Bye.